Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. George Garcia once thought his life was perfect. His wife, Patricia, seemed to embody all of his dreams. Beautiful, smart, and, as he believed, utterly devoted to him. They first met in college while both were engrossed in their respective studies. George was studying to become an engineer, and Patricia was on her way to becoming a lawyer. However, fate brought them together in a creative writing class, which neither of them had particularly chosen. Their last names, Anderson and Garcia, placed them next to each other by chance, and it was here that George first felt Patricia's charm. Though George wasn't the most attractive guy on campus, that didn't matter. They instantly clicked, sharing jokes and laughter in the midst of the dry, strict academic environment. Their friendly conversations in class soon evolved into meetings outside of it, and before long, friendship blossomed into something more. What started as light companionship quickly transformed into a relationship that provided both of them relief from the stresses of their studies. Their bond was filled with joy, laughter, and undeniable physical chemistry. One evening, in the middle of the semester, what began as a simple dinner and movie unexpectedly turned into an unforgettable night. That night, George walked Patricia home, intending only to say goodbye, but a simple farewell kiss turned into something much more. One kiss led to another, and the next morning George woke up in Patricia's bed. From that moment on, their relationship grew even stronger, and by the start of the next semester, they were completely devoted to each other. Between their intense studies and their blossoming romance, they barely had time for anything else. As time went on, their relationship only deepened. They began introducing each other to their families. Patricia joined George's family for Thanksgiving, and George spent Easter with Patricia's family. For Christmas, they decided to stay on campus, enjoying the solitude and each other's company. Their families fully approved of their relationship, and when graduation approached, no one was surprised when George proposed to Patricia, and she immediately accepted. Both felt their relationship was something special, and they weren't about to let it slip away. After college, they transitioned into their careers effortlessly. George secured a position with a construction company that valued his hands-on approach to engineering, while Patricia began her career at a prominent law firm. Their demanding jobs left little free time, but they always found moments for each other, whether it was vacations, busy weekends, or passionate nights. Time flew by, and before long, 7 years had passed. As their wedding anniversary approached, George decided it was time to think about the future. He envisioned them starting a family, buying a house, and building something more permanent than their current apartment. Financially, they were both doing well, and George believed it was the perfect time to plan the next phase of their life. However, Patricia didn't share his vision. Strangely, they had never discussed their future beyond the wedding. They never argued, and Patricia seemed completely content with their life. She saw no reason to change anything. Maybe one day she would be ready for more, but at that moment, she was happy with how things were. A few days before their anniversary, George was in the kitchen making dinner. This had become his routine since he finished work earlier than Patricia. He was in the middle of cooking when Patricia came home and, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, dropped a bombshell that changed everything. "I have a date this Friday," Patricia said calmly as she walked into the house. George froze, unable to comprehend what he had just heard. Surely he misunderstood her. He asked her to repeat herself, and she did so with the same calmness. She had agreed to go on a date with a man named Connor, casually adding the affectionate nickname Con, as if it were the most normal conversation. At that moment, George's world collapsed. Shock gave way to a flood of questions. "Why? Are you unhappy? Have you been cheating on me? Do you want a divorce?" His mind raced, searching for answers. How could this have happened? Who was Connor? What had he missed? Their relationship, even their intimate life, seemed so solid. Patricia, seemingly unaffected, answered with a chilling calm. "It's simple," she said, as if explaining something obvious. "I get attention all the time. Even when we're together, you've seen it." Throughout school and university, dating was never my focus. All my time and energy were dedicated to studying and earning my degree. But lately, you've been pushing me more and more towards the idea of settling down, buying a house, and starting a family. So, I thought, why not try dating? Besides, there's this incredibly attractive guy who's been flirting with me, probably the most handsome guy who's ever shown interest in me. George froze, stunned. Well, thank you, Patricia. What a great boost to my self-esteem, he replied, his voice laced with sarcasm. And what about us? Are you just going to toss me aside like an old toy? Oh, George, come on, Patricia responded. You know you're handsome, and I love you. It's just something fun I want to try. It's not like it's serious. George felt anger boiling inside him. Well, I absolutely disagree, he snapped. I think you shouldn't be dating other men. It'll destroy everything we've built. Patricia rolled her eyes and let out a heavy sigh. George, I didn't realize you were so dramatic. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just one date, nothing special. Deciding not to let her belittle him, George replied, Fine, if it's such a minor thing, then I'll go on a date too. Patricia couldn't hold back her laughter. You? On a date? She laughed, incredulous. You're kidding, right? You couldn't find a date by Friday if your life depended on it. Her laughter grew louder, filled with condescension. Look, it's easy for women to get dates, even if they're not supermodels. But for men, especially those who aren't drop-dead gorgeous, that takes effort. You're sweet, George, but attractive? Not exactly. Her laughter echoed through the room, and George felt his patience snapping. He couldn't believe she was mocking him like this. First, she announced she was going on a date, and now she was humiliating him, saying he could never do the same. Her relentless laughter was the final straw, like a knife twisting in an already open wound. He couldn't take it anymore. But instead of lashing out, George made a choice. He needed to leave before things went too far. Patricia, I'm too angry to think clearly right now. You blindsided me, and now you're laughing at me. With those words, he stormed out of the house, heading to his friend Robert's place. Robert had been his closest friend for years. They played video games, drank together, and understood each other without needing many words. That evening was no different. George didn't explain why he was there, and Robert didn't ask. That was the nature of their friendship. The next morning, George arrived at work with a pounding headache and a bit late. For the first time in his life, Megan, the office administrator, immediately noticed something was off. She had always had a soft spot for George, but chose not to say anything. His boss, if he noticed, said nothing either. George was too reliable for anyone to make a fuss over one bad day. That evening, when George returned home, he didn't want to make dinner for both of them, but out of habit, he did it anyway. Patricia came in at her usual time, and, as expected, she couldn't resist another jab. Oh, back after your little temper tantrum? She mocked, a smug smile on her face. So, any updates? Still planning on finding yourself a date by Friday? Her words dripped with arrogance. George looked at her, barely recognizing the woman standing before him. When had everything gone so wrong? Where had the love and joy in their marriage gone? In a calm but firm tone, George repeated, Patricia, if you go on this date, it will destroy us. And I'm serious. If you don't cancel it, I will go on a date this Friday, too. He braced himself for another dismissive response, but what she said next cut him like a knife. Oh, really? And who are you planning to go on a date with? Megan from your office? She sneered. She's old enough to be your mother, weighs as much as a hippo, and is married to a man who'd probably kill you if you even looked her way. There are no other women left at your work, so who are you going to date? Maybe you'll ask one of the guys out? Yeah, that'll go over real well. Robert was the last one left. George suspected that he might have a girlfriend, so if Robert wasn't interested in relationships with both genders, his luck had clearly run out. Maybe it was time to call an escort? After all, paying for company wasn't really cheating, right? George wondered if Patricia had any idea that her mocking, dismissive laughter was slowly eroding his love for her, like acid eating through steel. Who was this woman she had become? Were all the good moments they had shared just a mask hiding her true nature? George felt utterly drained, not just physically, but spiritually. In silence, he headed to the bedroom. Patricia came in later, surprised to see that he was already fast asleep. It was usually George who initiated their intimate moments, but tonight he had no desire for that. She felt her usual longing, but waking him didn't even cross her mind. Their physical closeness had always been consistent, especially on weekends, so this sudden distance felt strange to her. By midweek, when Patricia came home from work, she found George furiously typing on his phone. They had always agreed, no phones after work, so they could focus on each other over dinner. The food was already ready, but George didn't even look up when she entered the room. A sly smile appeared on her face, and she let out a short laugh. "Trying to make me jealous, George?" she asked sarcastically, her voice dripping with scorn. "No kiss today? Too busy with your Friday night plans?" Her tone was sharp, and she continued, "Who's texting you? Megan? I bet her husband would love to know. Or is it Robert? Are you two up to something, George?" Her laughter grew louder, turning into a cackle. Each mocking remark stabbed George in the heart like a knife. With every word, his feelings for her seemed to wither. He began to resent her more and more. Slowly, he raised his head from his phone. "Patricia, this has to stop." His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it. "You're destroying us with these jokes and barbs. If this keeps going, I'm warning you, our marriage won't survive." For the first time, Patricia fell silent. She shrugged, as if brushing it off. "Oh, George, relax. It's just one date. You'll survive. It's no big deal. I told you, I just want to know what it's like to go on a date with an incredibly attractive person. I've never done it, and I'm just curious." George's frustration grew. "We made vows to each other, Patricia. What we have is supposed to be special, and you're tearing it apart." He turned and went upstairs, leaving her alone in the kitchen, where the tension hung in the air. The next day, Patricia came home to an empty house. George arrived later, but something was different. His hair was freshly cut, styled in a way he hadn't worn it in years. It reminded her of when they first met, though she preferred his current look. Unable to resist, she made a sarcastic comment. "New haircut for your big night out?" she said with a smirk, deliberately making air quotes, then burst into laughter. "I'm sure Robert will appreciate it when you two meet on Friday." George completely ignored her, walked past, and headed to the bedroom to change. But what he saw in the bedroom only added fuel to the fire smoldering inside him. When he returned to the kitchen, Patricia was already waiting with that familiar smirk. "I noticed a Victoria's Secret bag on the dresser," she said innocently. "Interesting choice. So did you buy yourself some lingerie for your just a night out? Looks like more than just a meeting." Her words were like poison, but she didn't stop. "What kind of lingerie did you pick, George? Funny, you never wore anything like that on our honeymoon. I remember asking about wedding night lingerie, and you said your body was more than enough for me, and now you're buying this. If it's just a date, I guess he won't even see it, right?" George's anger flared, but he fought hard to keep it in check. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. He wanted to explode, but somehow he managed to hold himself back. In the chaos of the last few days, George was barely keeping afloat. Patricia, whether blissfully unaware or completely indifferent to his inner turmoil, continued to behave as if nothing had changed. She seemed lost in her own thoughts, lightly smiling to herself. "You have to be a special kind of person," she said thoughtfully, her tone carefree, "to remain the most attractive guy." She cast a fleeting glance at George and casually shrugged. "It just makes me feel even more attractive." George's patience, already hanging by a thread, snapped. His words came out cold and sharp. "Oh, how great that my confidence is just fine," he responded sarcastically. But Patricia kept going in the same vein. "It's so important for me to see you in your underwear, and now some random guy gets that pleasure on what you call just a date?" George's irritation reached its peak. "Let's get something straight, Patricia. This has gone too far. If you put something on for me tonight and cancel your date tomorrow, I might be able to get through this. But if you don't, if you really go on that date, we're done." Patricia giggled, completely ignoring the seriousness of his words. "You're always so desperate for intimacy," she waved dismissively. "I've waited all week, and this is the longest I've gone without it." It's always about you, isn't it? She continued, a challenge in her voice. I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to wear something just for you. George stared at her, his gaze hardening, making her squirm nervously under his scrutiny. After a tense pause, George finally spoke. If you go on that date on Friday, we will never make love again. With that, he turned and walked toward the bedroom, leaving her to ponder his ultimatum. Friday arrived, and as promised, George did nothing to prepare dinner. He was already making plans for himself when Patricia returned from work. She found him dressed to the nines. He wore a freshly ironed shirt and new trousers, looking even better than usual. This only intensified her irritation over their recent lack of intimacy. At one point, she considered making the first move, but her stubbornness won out. She wasn't going to be the one to initiate. Patricia had her own plans for the evening. She began getting ready for her date, noticing something odd in the apartment, but she dismissed it, too preoccupied with the excitement of meeting Ted to think much of it. George left, and soon after, Patricia also departed, meeting Ted at a trendy restaurant. Dinner went smoothly. Ted was charming and attentive, entertaining her all night. When dinner ended, Ted suggested continuing the evening at his place, and Patricia, without hesitation, agreed. She imagined an exciting, passionate night, but reality was far from her fantasy. As soon as they walked through the door, Ted's behavior shifted abruptly. He pushed her onto the couch and sneered, "Bet you love being easy prey." The words stung, and all her enthusiasm evaporated. She quickly slipped out of the situation, trying to preserve a shred of dignity. The night was still young, and going home would mean admitting defeat, so she went to her friend Emily's place. She spun a fabricated story about a fight with George, and Emily gladly welcomed her. They spent the night watching romantic comedies and drowning their frustrations in cheap wine. The next morning, Patricia woke up with a pounding headache, the hangover a harsh reminder of the previous night. Emily suggested they go shopping to clear their minds, and Patricia, in no rush to return home, agreed. When she finally got back, it was well past dinner. She expected to find George brooding, but instead, the apartment was empty. It was only then that she noticed what had been off all along. George's things were gone. His work boots weren't by the door, and his side of the dresser was cleared out. She smirked, shaking her head, deciding that this was just an overreaction on his part. "He'll come crawling back," she muttered, with his tail between his legs, begging to forget all about this. She also wondered how his own night had gone, quietly laughing at the thought. But by the following Saturday, her amusement had worn thin. George still hadn't returned, and there wasn't a word from him, not a single call or message. She briefly considered calling his parents or his friend Robert, but her pride stopped her. After all, George had left. If he wanted to come back, he could. He could call, text, or show up whenever he wanted. But she wasn't going to look for him. As the second week dragged on, her irritation grew. She couldn't understand where he had gone. She even drove by his workplace, spotting his truck in its usual spot. But George himself was nowhere to be seen. Patricia was slowly beginning to realize that she might have caused far more damage than she had initially imagined, although the full weight of her actions had not yet hit her. Their relationship always seemed solid to her, so how had one simple date turned into such chaos? The more she replayed everything in her mind, the more confused she became. It had been 2 weeks since she casually mentioned to George that she had gone on a date with someone. 2 weeks since she had walked into the office and been blindsided by the news of the impending divorce. The shock was still fresh, and the word stunned didn't even begin to describe how she felt. Patricia had always thought George had a flair for drama, but now it was beginning to seem like he was just being irrational. Divorce over one date? It seemed utterly ridiculous. Moreover, he had left her a note, asking her to contact his lawyer if she had any questions about the divorce. The nerve! Patricia could barely believe it. Her thoughts drifted back to their shared history. 2 years of dating in school, 7 years of marriage, and now she was being asked to consult a lawyer? As if she couldn't handle this without much effort. Half the lawyers in her firm were already eyeing her. But then, a troubling image flashed through her mind. George and Robert together. An unpleasant feeling crept into her soul. Could George really be seeing Robert? And even more outrageously, were they planning to get married? The thought seemed absurd, and Patricia couldn't help but smirk. What a joke. She stuffed the divorce papers into her briefcase and went home, convinced that this whole thing would blow over soon. George couldn't possibly be serious about this. He was just trying to force her to apologize, but she wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. However, as time passed, Patricia started to feel a growing sense of frustration. She ate dinner alone, night after night, in their once shared condo. The silence was becoming unbearable. As time went on, Patricia began to realize just how much she missed George. She had enjoyed his company far more than she had been willing to admit. Now that he was gone, the void he left was becoming unbearable. A sense of guilt started to stir within her. Maybe, just maybe, she had made a mistake. But admitting that was hard, so she devised a plan. She needed more information, and that meant she had to talk to Robert. Patricia knew where Robert liked to hang out, so she deliberately arranged to accidentally run into him one day. When Robert saw her, his first instinct was to run. He always found Patricia intimidating. But she caught him before he could leave, and they exchanged strained greetings. The awkwardness in the air was palpable, and Patricia could feel the tension. Robert knew exactly why she had sought him out, and it made him uneasy. George had already told him everything, and Robert had no desire to get involved in Patricia's schemes. In his opinion, she should have been begging George for forgiveness for how she had treated him. But Patricia, with all her legal skills, found herself at a loss. Her ability to persuade and argue was useless here. The silence between them stretched on until Robert could no longer hold back. "Enough with the games," he exploded, his irritation boiling over. "You're here because you want to know where George is and you think I'll help you. Well, guess what, Patricia? Screw you. He loved you, and you treated him like garbage. You broke his heart, laughed at him, and now you're surprised that he wants a divorce?" Patricia blinked, startled by the venom in Robert's voice, but she still didn't grasp that he wasn't going to help her. "Come on, Robert," she tried to smooth things over. "This is just a misunderstanding. If you tell me where to find him, we can fix everything." Robert had always gone along with whatever Patricia said. She was incredibly beautiful, the woman of his dreams, and out of loyalty to George, he had never wanted to cause any problems. But now, seeing her true nature, he felt no obligation to be kind. She didn't care about George, didn't care about their marriage, and she had proven that with her actions. He was ready to stop playing her games. "Patricia," he said with disdain in his voice, "we both know you're not here by accident. You came for answers, but I don't have any for you. George worshipped you, and you threw it all away for a casual fling. He warned you, but you laughed in his face. And now you're shocked that he's moving on? Let him go. Enjoy your pretty boys." He walked past her without even sparing a glance, leaving without looking back. Patricia stood frozen, stunned by his words, but soon brushed off the entire situation. She convinced herself that Robert was no different from the others, just another man trying to seduce her, not worthy of her attention. Yet despite her outward confidence, something inside her remained unsettled, and she felt the urge to talk to someone. But who? Emily was out of the question. Her friend had once hinted she dreamed of having a partner like George. Her parents weren't an option either. They always admired George. In the end, Patricia decided to do nothing. Time passed, exactly 4 months, until a court summons left her with no choice. Reluctantly, she turned to a divorce attorney from her firm, one who specialized in divorces. After laying out her situation, the attorney advised her to proceed with the divorce. Though Patricia hesitated, clinging to a hope of saving the marriage, the barrage of legal questions soon made her position clear. "Have you spoken to your husband since he left?" the attorney asked. "No," she replied quietly. "Have you continued seeing Connor or anyone else?" "Not Connor." Her voice hardened. "He turned out to be a selfish jerk, but I have needs too." "Do you really think your husband wants to reconcile?" the attorney pressed. Patricia faltered. Doubts began creeping into her mind. She thought she might have destroyed something good, but still believed that if she spoke to George, they could fix things. In the end, she agreed to meet with him, though reluctantly accepted the inevitability of the divorce. However, the divorce attorney was puzzled. Was this the same Patricia rumored around the office? The woman supposedly always on the lookout for a new man? Now she seemed completely blind to the fact that George had emotionally checked out long ago. There was no chance he would come back, whether or not he had someone else. Patricia just didn't see it. When the day came, they met in George's attorney's office. Patricia thought he looked surprisingly good, while George couldn't help but notice how worn out she appeared. It was obvious. She hadn't been sleeping, had lost a lot of weight, and was clearly under immense stress. But despite all of that, Patricia still didn't grasp the full picture. So, after some polite small talk, she decided to ask George directly. "What does all of this mean, George? I went on one innocent date, and you're blowing it up to the point of filing for divorce?" she demanded. George sighed, tired of this conversation. She really didn't understand. "I warned you, Patricia. I told you this would destroy us." His tone was firm but calm. "Do you really think that date meant nothing? You didn't even sleep with the guy? What about the lingerie you wore for him, the one you never wore for me? You enjoyed flaunting yourself in front of him, just like you did with the others before him. You humiliated me, made me feel worthless, and I was the one you said you loved?" His voice grew slightly louder. "No, Patricia. You've always thought only about yourself. What you needed, what you could get. This marriage? It was never about us. And just so you know, that same Friday I went on a date too. It went well, really well. In fact, I'm planning to marry her as soon as the divorce is finalized. So sign the papers and let me go." George stood up, his words hanging in the air, and he left without looking back. Patricia sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The full weight of the situation hit her. She had indeed ruined everything. But it was too late now. She had already agreed to the divorce, and when it was finalized, she left with half of the assets, including the apartment. Years passed. Patricia dated handsome men, went through failed relationships, and even dealt with some health issues. It was only after seeing a therapist that she realized the painful truth. She needed to grow up. By then, there were many regrets, but none weighed as heavily as the loss of George, the one man she had truly pushed away. Although she eventually met someone kind and reliable, nothing would ever compare to what she once had with George. This regret would haunt her for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, George's life moved on. He went on that fateful date, and by midweek he wasn't exchanging messages with Megan or Robert, but with someone else. Megan, one of his colleagues, had never liked Patricia. She was sharp-tongued and quick to judge people's characters. So when George, another colleague, came to work upset after a fight with Patricia, Megan immediately sensed that something had happened. Over lunch, George told her the whole story. Megan liked George, quite a lot. He wasn't like the other engineers, not arrogant or overconfident. As it turned out, Megan had a daughter 3 years younger than George. Soon, she gave him her daughter's phone number. That evening, George wasn't texting Megan or Robert, but Megan's daughter, which marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. George soon learned that Abigail was single and thriving in her stable and well-paid career. Unlike him, she had an infectious smile that could light up any room, and there was no denying that she was very attractive. However, what mattered most to him was that she eagerly agreed to go on a date with him the following Friday. His wife, Patricia, was not a part of this new chapter in his life that he envisioned, and her absence from this date would definitively mark the changes in their relationship. Judging by the hints from Abigail's mother, nothing stood in their way. Abigail felt that George would make a wonderful companion for her, and her intuition proved to be right. Shortly after George and Patricia's divorce was officially finalized, he married Abigail. Their bond was genuine, built on mutual love, and they lived a happy marriage, filled with passion and deep affection, which lasted forever. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.